Hi, my name is Gene Rosendale, and welcome to session 1 of Building a Referral Machine. Now, today's session is dedicated to preparation, and that's generally a little bit less exciting than actually doing it, but it's a critical step. And the good news is that you will walk away with a different 30-second commercial today, most likely. It will be different significantly than what you've been doing. So let's get on with it. Let's first of all revisit a couple of concepts about the introductory session. So first of all, let's make sure that we understand and we're on the same page about what problem we're trying to solve and how we think we're going to solve it. So the problem we think we're going to solve are a lot of the shortcomings or the things that frustrate us when it comes to conventional forms of networking. That's going to events, that's meeting people for coffee all the time, it's joining networking groups. All of that is all predicated on certain basic assumptions that are involved in what people refer to as networking. So what we're trying to do is break a lot of that thinking, and as a result, we can really have a high impact on the results that we get. So let's talk about the problem we think we're solving. We feel that conventional networking just requires too much time that has to be invested in given the return that we're getting. And not to mention that it just takes a long time generally for results to accrue. And a lot of people are frustrated by that and oftentimes refer to it as farming because it's kind of you plant seeds and then 6 months later maybe something comes out of the ground. Now, one of the problems with networking is that oftentimes what comes out of the ground is far too random. The kind of people that you get introduced to, oftentimes too random, and really contributes to this idea that I'm being introduced and I'm being connected to people that really aren't that useful to me. There's also some people feel that to really engage very much in a lot of conventional networking, it really does require that you're a fairly gregarious, outgoing, kind of a social personality to really enjoy it. Because a lot of those folks get a lot out of the going to events and being part of networking groups. The biggest issue, though, regardless of what other things, these contributing factors, how they may bother you, at the end of the day, the biggest problem is the result. The result is that you build a network that where 5% of the members in your network are actually doing something actively on your behalf. They're introducing you to people, they're giving people your name and number, they're promoting you actively with action and not intention. Right? A lot of people have good intentions, but you've got 5% that are actually taking action, which results in some benefit to you. And unfortunately, 95% of the network isn't working for you. So really another way to look at this and to keep this in perspective, I'm about to be introduced to somebody and they want to meet for coffee. Now, going into that meeting, that means, this statistic here, is that unless this meeting is very different than the ones I've been doing, that it's going to be representative of all the others. And that means I've got a 5% probability that I'm going to spend an hour with this person and nothing's going to come of it, or something will come of it 5% of the time, and nothing will come of it 95% of the time. So those kind of odds are the kind of odds that we just don't run businesses on. We just don't embark on any kind of strategy that has a 5% chance of success. So this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to change that. So really, if we have a more effective networking methodology, ideally, we want it to be not slow to deliver results, but actually your fastest path to revenue. We talked about how your existing network today, and any given network that you'll have, some fraction, 3, 4, 5% of your network, maybe as much as 10%, depending on how good it is aware of some opportunity for you, but for a number of reasons you're not going to find out about it. And it's not because of malintent. It's just that there's a lot of psychological reasons why that's just not going to happen. And we talked a little bit about that in the introductory video. So what we want to do is that we want to change it so that is in fact the case that 5, 6, 3, 4, whatever percent of your network that is exposed to an opportunity for you, that they make the connection and that they in fact get you introduced to it. The second thing is we want to make sure that when we meet people, because we are going to spend what is valuable time to spend an hour with somebody in the middle of a business day, on a business day, is that the vast majority, a very high percentage of the folks will, within a week's time, and you'll see when we get into the behaviors, within a week's time will have you, if not at the end of that first meeting, in their 5%. In other words, it's the 5% of people in their network that they will actually take action for. So everybody does that in reverse, right? They take action on people in their network, but it's always a 5%. And on the receiving side, we only see 5% of our network actually taking action on our behalf. So we need to get almost every meeting we have with somebody, almost by our choice, we can almost ensure that they will see us as one of the top 5% of people in their network that they need to do work for. and promote. The third thing, we only want to get introduced to the right connections. Okay? So people complain all the time that I'm being introduced to folks that somehow can't lead me to business. I can introduce you to my mother. She's an 85-year-old Japanese lady, about this tall, wonderful human being. But I can assure you, if I do that, you're probably not going to get any business introductions from her. Very little that's going to help your business will happen, right? So we can't allow those things to happen, and you'll find out that in the future you have huge control over that. And if that ever happens, it's your fault. Okay, so that's a wonderful thing. We want to be able to rapidly grow our network of eyes and ears. And what I mean by eyes and ears are people that are in fact awake out there in the marketplace for you. Now they're doing their thing, but they're awake for you. Okay, now it takes a lot to get that to happen, because really that's an unusual request to ask somebody to be thinking about you of all the people they know, and their primary effort is to feed their family, not yours. So it's really a difficult task. On the other hand, I think we have a process that makes that happen. And as a result, we'll grow your network to much larger and also far more productive. And there's two dimensions of the productivity. One will be, are they the right people? Are their eyes and ears awake for you? Right? And then how large is your network? We'll be able to grow it in all those dimensions to get you a 10x increase in productivity. So the strategy was take your current network, which is what we'll be working on in the next session. Take your current network, we call it reactivating it. In other words, getting them to see you differently and getting them to see what their relationship is with you and what you do for each other is very different than what they have been thinking. So we're going to get them to see you as no risk, keep them thinking about you, make sure that they know how to help you, they know what a good introduction is for you, they know an opportunity when they see one for you, and most importantly is we're going to get them to want to help you. It turns out, unlike things like in networking events or networking groups where people ought to, they should, they might, they're supposed to, it's very different than want. When somebody wants to help you, the return that you get is multiple times that. In terms of their lifetime referral potential, it's a magnitude more. So we're going to get people to want to help you, which is really one of the only ways that you'll get them to keep thinking of you. Okay? So we'll talk more about that. So we talked about the multiple dimensions through which we will build your network, so it's much larger, and of course, as a result, even though it's a greater percentage, it's still a percentage of your network will be working for you. But it'll be a much larger one, so therefore you're going to get a much greater return. Now, most folks who do the referral machine, who may have relied completely on the extreme form of hunting like cold calling, very challenging task that can completely replace cold calling with this in a year's time, to where they can build a long-term business where they don't have to, like cold calling, where the moment you stop cold calling is the moment you stop getting new business. So this is not that way. This is an investment. And it's an investment in a network that continues to yield dividends, even though you continue to invest in it very little once it's built. And we'll talk more about that. So we exposed to you in the introductory video this six-step cycle, which we'll be using all the time, but just continues to repeat. In fact, the majority of your business development activities will be centered around this. Okay. Now, we talked about also this concept of the three-legged stool, major components of business development and marketing, but we only want to carry two concepts here forward to today's session. So this concept of the fact that a prospect is not a prospect or just a profile until something happens. So something has to have changed in their life and in their business, whatever the case is, something has to have changed that's caused them to no longer just be a profile, but to in fact be looking for a solution that you provide. That's one concept. The same, and it's a triggering set of circumstances. That's what's important. The second concept is the fact that there's always somebody who is aware of that, other than the person it's happening to. There's a lot of stakeholders or bystanders that are aware of it. It may mean nothing to them, at least for now. You will make it more meaningful for them, but they're aware of it. Okay, so those are witnesses for you, and their job descriptions, and we'll talk more about that as well. So it's important that we take those two things, because those two concepts are critical to these three steps, which are the three most critical steps of the six-step cycle here of building a referral machine. It's going to be very critical to the first meeting you have with people, to be able to understand how it is and get them to want and to get excited about the fact that you're going to make an introduction, and to be in a position to make an introduction every time. And then also in terms of making sure that people give you the right introductions, these two concepts will dominate the dynamics. So the first thing I'd like to explore in more detail is this whole concept of triggering circumstances. So when a profile becomes a prospect. Now, there was a time in my corporate life, in corporate America, back in the Fortune 500 days, before I retired, I ran large sales and marketing organizations. Now, when it came to the marketing organization, a common concept was for us to take a look at our existing customer base. So this is a customer that we've had, so maybe say it's 3, 4, 5 years. The concept was, let's go to our best customers, ask them why they like us, and then based on that, that'll give us the insight we need to be able to go and promote it to prospects who aren't our customers yet. So that seemed like a reasonable idea. The problem is, regardless of the company, regardless of the market, the product and service offerings, it didn't seem to matter. That it turned out the answer was the same. It was always some form of, we enjoy the relationship, the ease of doing business, your expertise, we love your product and service offerings. It was these things. Now, it turned out that it was always the same, so we questioned, well, what's the utility of that if it's always the same? So we thought, what matters is actually what happened just before they became a client. It was what were the circumstances going on in their life that caused them to stop doing what they would normally do and actually take their head out of their normal business sand and look around for someone like us. Well, they obviously had some kind of a problem where they needed that solution, but something triggered the fact that it was something they couldn't take any longer. They need to go out and pursue something. So by definition, whatever's going on at that time is compelling enough to stop what you're doing, take the time out, and go find a solution. So it turned out that once they became a client, they actually forgot about that. Because they had all these years, that was a small moment in time, yet they had all this time being our client, and that's what dominated their thinking. Okay. Again, not that useful to us. So for you, what I'm saying, there are a number of rules. In that place, it turned out that the reason they became a client and the reason they enjoyed remaining a client turned out to be very different things. So it was really a red herring. We were misled in our own thinking. So it was bad logic. So we had to start focusing on the reason they became a client, because that is what we're scanning our marketplace for. Okay, so from a marketing and sales perspective, this is a very important concept. We are scanning, and we need to be an expert in that aspect of our client base in our marketplace, of their life that has changed, that's caused them to need us. And it's not as clear as we might think it is. It takes a little bit more thinking than you think. So by definition, those are compelling circumstances. See, what they did is they triggered the need for us. We have to understand what those things are. And one last thing is that once we understand what those dynamics are, what we have to do is that we have to translate that, I guess, in terms of what is it that any of the key stakeholders involved would be saying. So in other words, if I were a witness to it, what indicators would I have that you in fact are suffering those circumstances that are triggering a need for my friends' products and service offerings? So it has to be something colloquial, something they would have said like in a staff meeting. So we'll talk a little bit more about that, but that's an important element of this. So let's think about what is it that are triggering circumstances for your product and service offerings. This is something you really do need to be expert at. You need to take the time to figure out. So let's use the example that I think we used in the introductory video about something I think we can all universally relate to, and that's a residential real estate broker. So somebody who buys and sells a house. I think most of us have been in that position many times, or soon will, but it's a common environment for all of us. So we use the example there for trying to display what would be triggering circumstances of witnesses. So triggering circumstances about somebody buying and selling a house, which is what the realtor broker is interested in, is the buying and selling of homes. So what does it cause somebody to want to buy or sell a home? And we concluded that the reasons or the motivations were, I needed to upsize, I needed to downsize, or I needed to just change location. So we looked at those are the reasons, but those aren't the triggering circumstances. We have to put it in the circumstances of one's life. So the circumstances of one's life, we concluded, would be things like, I got a promotion, so I don't need to live in this neighborhood. I can live in the move-up neighborhood, as they call it. So it's a much more status-oriented neighborhood that costs more. So that would be one thing, upsizing. In my particular case, when we were a young couple, my wife and I, our first children were twins. Turned out you need everything bigger just because you have two little ones. Turns out your cars need to be bigger, your house needs to be bigger, your savings accounts need to be bigger, your income needs to be bigger, everything. So that could be one of the things that triggers a need to move to a larger home. The transfer was the change in life circumstances that would trigger a need for changing location, for example. Now, that could also be retirement, but downsizing was another example where retirement could be, I just need to leave this place. I don't need to be here because I don't need to be near a business center where the jobs are. Or it could be that I'm downsizing simply because I'm empty nesting, all my kids are gone. I don't need all this real estate, which made sense when I had 5 or 6 people in the house. Now it's just my spouse and I. So that could be a reason. So those are triggering circumstances. So what are those in your business? You have to think that through a little bit. We had a couple dimensions there, right? The first step was what's the logic and what was the reason? The reason was I need to go up or down or change address in our example. But the triggering circumstances had to be translated into life circumstances, okay? This isn't the part where we say, well, what would they be saying, right? But so far, we just need to get those triggering circumstances. So you need to, obviously that'll be one of the preparation assignments that you'll have to take away from this session, and we can move on for now. So now that you have that though, the triggering circumstances, and you understand that, that's the only thing you really need to build a more effective 30-second commercial. Now, I think in networking, they refer to them as 60-second commercials, elevator pitches, 30-second commercials. The whole concept being in the elevator, you have a very limited period of time, maybe 30 seconds to get your point across. Well, for us, it's actually going to be about 15 seconds. We have found that really people start to lose interest in what you're saying, unless, of course, they've asked you to explain something to them, then they're listening. But if you're just you're going on and on about yourself, generally speaking, it turns out about 15 seconds is how long you can be assured that they're actually listening, okay, in earnest. So it turns out ours will really be about 15 seconds. In some cases, they'll ask for a little more elaboration, in which case we'll get it up to a 30 or 60-second commercial sometime. So it has 3 major components. And remember, we talked about it being something that plants seeds, right? So let's, I think I can give you more detail there in a second. 3 components. The first is going to be an introductory 1 or 2 sentences that makes it clear what's the industry, what's your role, what's your job description, right? And what market do you serve, right? Or it could be what company you work for, but it's just that the really basic demographic type information that somebody expects to hear. The second section is more important, and that's the part where you're actually going to plant those seeds that we talked about. This is what dictates or what determines that how they recognize an opportunity for you. So what you're going to do is you're going to put in statements that reflect what your prospect is feeling, thinking, or potentially saying if they have those triggering circumstances or those change circumstances happening in their life. Okay? And then you'll have some sort of summary statement, which is kind of a 1 or 2 sentence overall benefit statement. And I'll give you a much more formula and an example in a minute. But philosophically, keep in mind that what we're trying to do is not educate them by telling them this is what we do, which is what almost everybody's 30 or 60-second commercial is, which in some cases, is 5 minutes, right? So it's basically trying to describe and trying to educate you on exactly what I do. And the logic behind it is that, well, I mean, if you understand what I do, you're in a much better position to really see an opportunity for me. Well, it turns out that isn't exactly the way the brain works, as it turns out. In fact, the more words you use, the more diluted it is. To you, this is your whole world, is your profession. Somebody who's not in your profession, they're just, unless they're thinking about getting in your profession, it's just not that interesting. And they can't carry that into the marketplace with them and make all the translations mentally that they need to into an opportunity, okay? And convert that to, this is an opportunity for you. Just doesn't work, but that's what everybody does. So we're going to change the way that works. And remember, it's about the triggering things in their mind. So we used, I think, the example in the introductory video of you decided you want to buy a particular kind of car. And you were thinking about cars and looking at cars for the last month and trying to decide which one you want to buy. And we said that yesterday you saw the one. And you're all excited because you said, yes, indeed, that's the one. Now, what we also noticed is after that, you just started seeing that car all over the place, where you may not have hardly ever seen it before. And we all know those cars were on the road the day before and the day before that, just as many. So we have to understand, well, what's really happening there. Now, the most important thing about that is the fact that that when you're driving around, you're going someplace, you're thinking about driving, you're thinking about safety, you're thinking about what you're going to do when you get there, you're thinking about all the items on your shopping list for when you get there. But the point is, you're not thinking about that vehicle. But what happens is, while you're thinking about other things, is a vehicle goes by and bingo, you see it, you notice it. Right? Because the whole neuroscience of the way this thing works is that 10,000 times more things, as our sensory capabilities allows, 10,000 more things to be brought into our mind per second than what we can consciously process. So what we choose to do is that we choose to pick filters for those things to filter out and screen out which of that 1/10,000th of what my sensory functions can deliver, which of that do I really care about? So on any given day or week or month, we have a set of filters we put up to make sure that we highlight those things. So once you decided that that was one of them, was that vehicle, that you don't have to be consciously aware of it, because again, your senses can pick up 10,000 times more things a second than you can process. So what it's done is that this vehicle's gone by, they weren't thinking about it, and they woke up and it triggered. Oh, there's another one. Now you go back to thinking of what you were thinking of. Well, we need to have ourselves be the car in our networking partner's mind so that they don't have to be thinking about us. It turns out we plant the seed so that when the event takes place external to them, it'll actually trigger an awareness that, oh, well, that's a thing for Gene. Okay, that's what we're trying to do. Now it takes two components. One is that they have to be able to identify what the car is. So we have to tell them what the car is, so that they know what it is. But the second half is that we really care about that car. You see, we open a filter because it's really relevant in our lives, because we decided we care. The problem is that we can't get other people to care. So we got to get that other part. That's the want to help you part that we have to get put in there. Because if they want to help us, they will then open the filter, and the filter will be for what we told them it needs to be for, which will be one of these things, number 2, right? The second section. So we will base our 30-second commercial not on educating, but on triggering, which is why the triggers was the key thing for this. Now, section 2 here, as I mentioned, colloquial terms. It's terms that people normally use in conversation. So it can't be in marketing speak. It can't look like something that you extract out of the website or marketing brochure. Okay? It has to be what people say, and it can't be about your product or solution. It has to be about the change in circumstances that I'm suffering that trigger my need for it, because that is what the prospect's going to be saying, thinking, or feeling. So what are the indicators of that? That's what we're looking for. And they would have said that, and this is the test in your mind, would they have said that in the staff meeting this morning? Okay? So that's the requirement. And then what we're going to do is that we're just going to shut this down and turn it back over to them. 30-second, 15-second commercial, and then you turn it back over to them. Because if you just leave it hanging, they may ask you a few more questions, and now it's still a lot more about me than it needs to be. I need to make it about them. And for those of you who are taking the Trust and Influence program, you'll understand all of the other benefits that accrue about making it all about them. So enough about that for this session. So an example of the format is this. I work for, or I am an accountant. I work for an accounting firm, and this is the company name. We offer these kinds of products and services to this particular marketplace. All right, so any version of that, if the person already knows what your role is, then you can skip that and just talk about the company, right? So it's not a lot of rocket science here. You know what needs to be done there. The magic really is in here. So we work with whatever your contact person is, vice president, CFO, for example, who are thinking or saying, we're concerned about this thing that represents a triggering circumstance, change in circumstance. So we need to, fix this problem. We're frustrated with this problem. So it doesn't have to be necessarily concerned, need, or frustrated, but it has to be words like that. Okay, it has to be old brain kinds of things. Emotional content is what that has to be. So it can be, we're afraid of, we're scared. This has happened. We've got frustrated, we need, concerned. Something with emotional content. Okay, so the last statement, again, the summary benefit statement of what you actually do, because we haven't really said what the benefit is here anywhere, so this is your opportunity to say, and we make these things go away, effectively is what that sentence is going to be about. So an example of that, if we just fill it in, say it's a management consultant, it's a strategy consulting firm. I'm a consultant at LaSalle Morrison Company, some made-up name. We offer management consulting services to mid-market companies throughout the United States. We work with executives who are thinking or saying, we're concerned about missing the current market opportunity. We need to figure out a way to get more market share, and we're frustrated that we're not growing a lot faster than our industry growth rate is growing. We help people identify what's holding them back. Then we help them create strategies and execution plans that'll get them to wherever they want to go. So that would be an appropriate, 15-second commercial. Covers the bases, and more importantly, it says this. So we can say, in summary, at the end of this, we can say, so if you ever hear somebody like these, right, say these things. In other words, this is what we're saying, right? You hear somebody in that marketplace, that kind of person, and you're a witness to me if, by the way, you work with that marketplace and you talk to those kind of people as well, selling them completely different things. But if you do, then you're a witness for me. Now, if you hear them say they're worried about finding a way to try to take more market share, grow faster than the industry, getting a bigger piece of a smaller pie, you see, that's how people talk. Now, that's something they could be saying at a staff meeting. I can envision the CEO saying this stuff to the executive staff at a staff meeting. That's really the criteria. So very simple concepts, but very powerful and profound in terms of the impact it can deliver. Okay, so makes sense. Not rocket science, but and you have some latitude here, but not a lot. By the way, the terms of the bullets, these are, by the way, I should tell you, these are interchangeable parts here, and you should probably have 10 or 12. The reason you'll have multiples is because you may call on multiple contacts within any given prospect company profile. You may have different market segments, in which case they might be saying different things. You may have multiple product lines, different service offerings, and they solve different problems. And so as a result, these things will be reflected differently. See, this is what's interesting about this. When you have the typical marketing department for an employer or for a company would just have one version. Now, you'll have industry-specific things, but you'll basically have one version in terms of this 30-second commercial because it's about me. The 30-second commercial is about me, not this one. But we do this, we do this, we do this, we do this. That's what most people's 30-second commercials are. So it doesn't really matter who I'm talking to because I'm talking about me. I haven't changed. So I can have one 30-second commercial. We can't, because our 30-second commercial is going to be the thing that you're going to hear somebody say. And that could be different people under different circumstances, but it's going to be what they're going to say at different levels of the organization, that sort of thing. So that's why you'll have 10 or 12, but you're only going to use a minimum of 2, maximum of 3. So 2 or 3 is all you're going to have time for. If you can make them really short, you can get 3 in. If for some reason you feel that this needs to be a lengthier commentary, well, then you may only be able to fit 2. Okay? So I wanted to make sure I covered that. So now that we have the triggering understood, what we have to do is that we have to start talking about witnesses to those triggering circumstances. So again, we're talking about what's going on with the person that causes them to become somebody's new client. So who's present to witness those triggering circumstances? Obviously the people that it's happening to, so they themselves. And it could be people adjacent to them, their board of directors, other executive peers or executives on their staff, other employees on their staff. Most of them, however, are going to be external. It's going to be any form of trusted advisor to those folks. So it could be the law firm, the accounting firm, or somebody else that's a trusted advisor. It could be service providers, other sales reps. Probably the vast majority of your opportunities will come from other people in the business development mode, okay? That because they're out there talking to them about their own service offerings and having a conversation with them and asking them how are things going, that the chances they will hear the person saying, well, we've got an initiative working on this, working on that. That's where you'll start to see the source of all your leads coming from. So that'll be the vast majority. But friends, family, association members, church members, that sort of thing. It can be anybody. But it has to be somebody who does talk to that person you call on and talks to them about those kind of things. I will give you one bit of insight here. There was an example where I had a client who did management consulting, and he did it with business owners of mid-sized companies. And And somebody that he met was a builder of $10 to $30 million homes. So really, I mean, this is for the very wealthy, right? A 10 to 20 or $30 million home is somebody who, in most cases, owns a company and may have owned it for generations. So that's the kind of wealthy person that this person, company owner, that this person calls on. So he has a friend who builds homes like that. And he's always talking to that homeowner. So based on this criteria, I want to make sure you didn't think that he was a good witness just because he calls on him, right? That builder. You see, because the problem is that when that homeowner, who is the CEO of a $200 million company, that he is not talking to him about these triggering circumstances, right? He's talking to him about architecture. He's talking to him about whether or not he wants an outdoor living room in his backyard, whether he wants a jacuzzi with that pool. That's what he's talking about. So the likelihood that he would hear a triggering circumstance for that management consultant is very low. So it turns out he's not a good witness, as it turns out. We'll talk more about it. So you will define your witnesses by job titles, I mentioned. So they will be, for the convenience of everybody in your network, it will be, accountant, lawyer, or whatever. But we want to be careful about very large professional terms like lawyer. We'll have to be more specific. Is it a litigator? Is it general counsel? Business lawyer? Is it family law practice? Is it intellectual property lawyer? Is it a estate planning lawyer? You see, many of these professions and a lot of people that have a similar job description actually break down into specialty areas. So you'll want to probably be specific about that when you talk about it. The more trusted the relationship, makes perfect sense, right? More trusted the relationship probably means the more that they'll divulge things that are bothering them, right? Problems that they have, which is what you do. You solve problems with your solutions. So they're usually better. Also, the earlier in the process, in the thought process of the prospect, that this witness hears about it, the better. You get somebody who hears about it on the back end, then it's possible that they've already entertained all of the people that they would like to consider to provide the solution, and it's too late for you to get introduced into the opportunity. So obviously, more on the front end, the better. So those are sort of minor considerations to add. So think in terms of now your list, which will be again one of the preparation activities you'll have to engage in. Now, the example we use for real estate, the residential realtor. So let's go back to that. So we concluded that the triggering circumstances would be upsizing, downsizing, changing location. And we thought that, or those would be the reasons. Triggering circumstances would be things like, I got a promotion, all of a sudden I've got a new family, or I could be retiring, or I could be getting transferred, or could be empty nesting. So now we came up with witnesses that may not have been the one that would have been obvious to the realtor had they not gone through this exercise. Obviously, there's a lot of very obvious ones, and you have many of those that are pretty clear. The problem with the ones that are the obvious cast of characters as witnesses is that for all of you and your competitors, they're also the same. So that you have an obvious witness for what you do. Well, on the other hand, he knows not only you, but he or she knows everybody else that does what you do as well. And then they've got a bit of a conundrum as to, well, who are they going to give an opportunity to? Okay. So those are nice to have. You have to have those as a foundation of your network. But how about some of these other ones that people aren't thinking about, your competitors aren't thinking about, because they're not going through this logical process? So with the realtor, they would have never otherwise thought that the highly placed members of the Twins Club, as I mentioned. Now, they might think about this, the idea of management or HR management of a large employer locally that employs a lot of people locally. They would know about promotions, retirements, transfers, things like that. So here you get all three of those dynamics covered with just potentially one contact. So there was a realtor that I knew who was very good at this and the Trust and Influence program. And about maybe 2006, I think it was. He was quite good at this. Now, what he had done, just using this one concept alone of triggering circumstances and witnesses, using this just to the analysis we went through today, he built programs, and it's just marketing, guys, right? It wasn't anything special. He built programs that he went to large employers nearby with. So one of them, for example, was the transfer in program. So went to all the HR organizations and major employers, managers and major employers locally, and he said, I got this program where you bring somebody in who's in mid-management or an executive level person and he was interested in those, by the way, because they buy bigger houses and his commissions would be bigger. So he said, I have a person dedicated, and he did have 6 assistants, and they were just like assistants. When you make $3 million a year in selling homes, you can afford a few assistants. So he had somebody who was dedicated to programs like this. So he had someone dedicated to understanding all the neighborhoods and developments within a 30-minute commute of this particular employer or any given employer he was talking to, saying that I make it my business to be very familiar with all of those. I put together a package and I maintain the statistics of the ratings of all the schools, for example, the commute patterns that I can educate people on. Because when they move there, we all take it for granted when we watch the weather person and the traffic person on TV in the morning, when they mention all of these freeways and highway numbers and stuff. Well, when you're a new person, that all sounds like a foreign language. So this person's going to decrypt all of that for him, explain all the traffic pattern issues, where the shopping is, where the alternative transportation, public transportation kind of things are, where all the clubs are, all those kinds of things that a new person moving in, like a steroids-based welcome wagon. So he put that together, which took very little effort, went to all these employers, and he started to become the official transfer guy for executives that came in. So that was pretty interesting. Now, I did the same thing for retirement. Had somebody else who within several hours of travel knew about all the retirement communities, knew about lakefront and lakefront homes, homes in the mountains and in quaint little towns nearby. There are a number of retirement models that he had in his mind that he found that there were patterns that people chose. And one of them was, we sell everything off and we buy a $500,000 RV and we just drive around the country all the time. We don't have a house, and we just stop with all the kids and visit all the grandkids, and we have so many that we can keep ourselves occupied. Well, that's the one he had to think about, because that's the one that didn't include buying a house. Now, it did include selling one, however, so he did have to know about it. So there were these 5 different retirement models that he thought of using this kind of logic. It got him thinking this way. And then he had essentially a logical package or a consulting kind of a thing that went along with this to help somebody think through what it is that he wants to do. And the whole thinking it through thing was very much a trust and influence based behavior. And he got people to realize his value, and of course they used him to sell their current house, and they also used him to buy a house maybe 2 hours away. So it was just genius. Built himself a huge, sold 300-400 homes a year. Understand that a realtor who's doing well in a normal market is generally selling 35 homes. Living in a $500,000 home themselves are doing so well. So this is dramatically more powerful than that was his result. But a lot of it was using these kind of concepts. So think about how that applies to your business. I can't tell you exactly how that is, but think this thing through. It's not a simple exercise. And remember, everything that you're going to be learning here in these programs are really going to be like learning a foreign language. One of your biggest obstacles is taking the mindset from what you were doing before and trying to bring it forward. And that's the bad news about this as well, is that we can't take a lot of what we've been doing and just tweak it and just say that here's a few tips and tricks that'll make it better. Now, we could come up with those things, I suspect, but we're only talking about 10% kind of improvements, 20% improvements. That's not what we're interested in these programs. It really is, it's multiple times. If it's not multiple times of impact, many multiple times, all the time, then I'm not interested, and I don't think you should be. So that's the reason we're all here, so keep in mind that sometimes we have to get into, like a new language, we have to get into a different mindset. So it's important you go through some of these exercises, because that's really part of the mental stretching that you have to do, is to think about things differently, because we're going to be making our networking partners think about things differently as well. And so it's important to understand this. I equate it to learning a new language, because you really are never really good at another language until you can start thinking in that language. See, we start taking our language and translating it into another language. What we really want to do is, when we ultimately get good, right, we think in that language, and we want to do that here too. So a lot of these exercises, as much as they may not be very interesting and entertaining, that's for sure, that they are things that will cause you to have to think differently. They will also appear to be a little bit harder than they should be, for that exact same reason. So stick with it. The summary of today was that you have to understand prospect profile, triggering circumstances, witnesses to triggering circumstances for both your benefit and also for your network's benefit. It's necessary for introductions that you have to make, the first meeting you make to identify introductions, making them value your introduction, okay? There is a situation, and I probably should stop here to explain this. Now, we learn more about this later about how the mind works and the logical lenses that we all use. Now, we're going to have to affect other people's lenses to make sure that they interpret what we're doing the right way. Here's an example. I was with the CEO of a company, and there's a well-known person in our large metropolitan area, well-known as being one of the most connected people around. Now, he knows a lot of companies who have sent their sales folks through this process, so he's very familiar with it, and he certainly knows who I am. So, great guy. Has like 35,000 people in his LinkedIn profile at the moment. So he's very well connected, and he's a great guy. He goes and he makes a meeting and has a essentially networking meeting where he's introducing himself and his company to the CEO of this company. Now, the CEO of the company has enlisted Nonselling to be able to bring some of this kind of methodology into his firm. So he says, well, speaking of this whole introduction thing, he says, take a look at this. I took the liberty of printing off an email. So here's an email that I received. I meet this person, great guy, and then he leaves. And then I get an email where he's introducing me to one of his cronies, right? And he said, I really resent that. It turns out that the guy who was making the introduction thought he was doing the guy a favor. Yet how could the CEO be offended? He was offended. I said, so what is it about this that is offending you? And he said, well, I meet this guy. He finds out what we do. He finds out how successful we are. And what he does is he takes some of his buddies. He introduces them to me so that they can drink out of my trough as well. Well, I mean, actually, that's not that unusual interpretation, because the assumption would be that this guy in the network is good friends with the guy that called on him. They know each other, they're good friends, so he's now sending this vendor, another vendor to me, because he's thinking that somehow that vendor can sell me something. Not an unusual interpretation. We can't have that. None of that kind of loose cannon stuff. So we will see, especially in the Trust and Influence program, you'll see that part of our job and our power is to be able to give people the logical lens we want them to have, and then give them the message. Give them the lens first to ensure that they will understand our message. So the point I'm making here is that this other guy saw, because he's never been through this program, he saw other people who were being very successful all of a sudden doing this. And the outwardly appearing behavior was this idea of the introduction. He thought that the introduction was the magic. It's not. Okay, that's not the magic. It's part of it. The primary magic is this. It's what's happened in that meeting where we got the person to want to take our introduction. Now, our introduction is going to be, because we need to do it 100% of the time, right? And most of you are going to say, well, God, they want to meet prospects, and I hardly ever have a prospect for people I meet. Yeah, well, that's a problem. So we have to have a system that's not based on you having a prospect. In fact, it's assuming you don't have a prospect. That someday, maybe, in a certain moment in time, when those changing circumstances happen to somebody close to you, you may be able to refer them a prospect. But the assumption is you don't. However, you do have a witness. The problem is most people don't think in terms of witnesses. You'll meet somebody who'll say, what you don't ask them, and this we're probably getting ahead of ourselves here, but you wouldn't ask somebody what's a good connection for you, because they're going to use their logic to decide what that is. Here's the answer. It could be, well, yeah, somebody who's a prospect looking for my services, telling me that they want to buy right now, and whatever you do, don't send me salespeople, because salespeople, they don't buy my stuff. Let me tell you, that's more common than not. So we've got to change people's thinking so they realize that I don't want to just meet prospects. I need to have more eyes and ears in the marketplace. Maybe I do need to meet salespeople, but not all salespeople. The beauty about you putting your list together on witnesses is that it's also very liberating to know not just who are my star targets for people to be in my network, it's the other 90% of human beings that someone could introduce you to that are not. That's a wonderful thing. Now, all that other 90% of people that you don't want to meet, that doesn't mean that they could never make an introduction for you. It's just that it's a much lower probability. Okay? We just don't want to live in a world of possibility. That's why everybody has a story. God, there's this very unsuspecting person. You'd never believe it, but they gave me an introduction to somebody that was awesome for me and became a client. Well, the reason they're telling you is because it's a story, and the reason it's a story is because it's not likely to happen. We don't base our strategy on things that are not likely to happen. So we're going to live in a world of probability, not possibility. And so that's why you want to pick witnesses that with high probability, they will in fact have the opportunity to send you an opportunity. Now, again, that other 90% of people that you may be investing in would have a very low probability, maybe 5%, right? They're no longer on the list. Now, it doesn't mean you're not nice to them. It just doesn't mean you're investing any time in them. So this is something we'll talk more about when we talk about the practical use of the referral machine. So the critical thing about today is that we do have to make an introduction or some form of 5% behavior. The 5% behavior is I'm taking a physical action on your behalf, right? That puts me in your 5%. If I do that for you, I'm special. So I have to be able to do that with everybody I meet, but I can't do it if they're thinking prospect. I got to get them thinking witness, because I've got tons of those, and so do you. Even if you think you hardly have anybody in your network, you have a lot of witnesses. And again, we'll talk more about that. So you also need it, obviously, to receive the proper introductions, and that the whole witness and triggering circumstances is critical to that logic, as you can see. Now, we also needed part of that, at least triggering circumstances, to build a more effective 30-second commercial. It's a different set of dynamics here, but we needed that component as a final piece to be able to put that together. So those are things we talked about today. It's obvious this is a preparation session, so there's a lot of homework. You really are going to have to understand fill out those forms, write the list of what are the triggering circumstances, who are the best witnesses for you, the mainstream ones and the not so mainstream ones. Create your 30-second commercial and understand you'll have some variations, and we know which component part is the variable that you can swap in and out. And that's where you create it for different audiences. And then also now go through, in preparation for reactivating your existing network, I want you to go through your list of contacts, whether it's 50 or 100 or 1,000 in whatever you use. LinkedIn, if you use Microsoft Contacts, or if you're using another form of contacts, or some kind of customer management program, that'd be fine too. So I don't know, any CRM system will be fine. You just need to go through whatever you're doing and identify the witnesses that are currently in your network. Now, we're going to use that list later, because this is a list you're going to go in contact to try to reactivate. People that aren't witnesses, you can choose to do that as well. But again, we're starting to move into spare time, right? Low probability returns. The critical thing that I want you to do is to make sure you get to the high probability people first. Now, practice your 30-second commercial as well. Practice it in the mirror, practice it as often as you can. You want this, by the way, to roll off your tongue with no thinking. Okay, that's what's critical. You shouldn't feel, and you will in the beginning, where if I were to say to you, okay, give me your new 30-second commercial, you're going to get all freaked out and flustered. You're going to have to think, okay, it's what are the components again, and what are my bullets again, right? You're going to take a universal one, the one that you'll use most of the time for your mainstream customer situation. Get that one as your primary and most universal 30-second commercial, and get it so that it's just constantly, you're watching your kid's soccer game, be pretending you're saying it. Think it through, get it to where in your sleep you can say it. So that's really the assignment. So I'm done for today. I will close it today, and then I will see you on the other side in the next session. Until then, bye.